Since the beginning of this Ukrainian crisis, we hear a lot of media and commentators using the phrase of the term of imperialism. So
Yep.
of Russian imperialism, Putin's imperialism became some sort of a popular catchphrase, a sort of common wisdom. But I suggest looking closer at what Russian establishment and specifically Putin has to say about it, because we can see a quite different picture when we analyze it. This question of whether this annexation of Crimea was an imperial one or a national one is not a purely academic question. It's not only a question of definition, but it has direct implementations in understanding both Russian internal and foreign policy, and both understanding what Russia is doing right now in Ukraine and in Crimea. So, basically, the discussion of Russian post-Soviet nation building is led for several years with different views, but until 2012 we can rather confidently describe it as purposefully ambiguous. But since 2012, since the beginning of Putin's third presidency, if you like, there's a certain shift, a national traditionalist shift. And the Ukrainian crisis, and specifically Crimea annexation, suggests us an excellent test case, and maybe even a litmus test case. Okay. So, first of all, we have to address the question of what is empire, because this term is being so widely used that it almost loses its meaning, specifically when it's being applied to Russia. So I use the Ronald Sunny definition, basically two main points. First of all, you've got to have a distinction between the metropole, the imperial center, the national imperial center, and the periphery. And secondly, the metropole dominates the periphery to the disadvantage of the periphery. So it might be complicated relations between the center and the periphery, but still you have hierarchical relations between the center and the national, usually the national components. Well, by contradiction, national relations, I define it as having basic equality among all countries' components and all its citizens, and having a profound solidarity among countries' residents, which basically constitutes the nationalism, national feeling. So, if we analyze discourses, what should we have if we have imperial discourse? We will probably have a basic differentiation between Russia, Crimea, and Ukraine. We'll see that discourse will stress the interest of the Russian metropole, not the annexed periphery, not the interest of Ukrainian people. And we'll see Russia's geopolitical struggles as the main reasoning for annexation, for Russian moves. On the other hand, if it will be a national discourse, we'll see that difference between Russian and Ukrainian nations is strongly differentiated. On the other hand, Crimeans will be shown as fully equitable and fraternal to the Russian national main group, as being part of the Russian nation. And of course, we will see the irredentist grounding for the annexation, meaning that the purpose of the annexation is to unite different parts of Russian nation. So let's take a look what Putin's got to say. First of all, on 4th of March, it's actually several days after Russians used military power in Ukraine, practically seized control over the peninsula, but Putin only said that he was extremely worried by the rampant radical nationalism and anti-Semitism in Ukraine, by which he, of course, denounces Ukrainian nationalism and Ukrainian statehood. And he said that there is no need to deploy forces yet, but he said that intervention is possible in extreme case, in case of danger for Crimean population. But the most interesting statement was made on Putin's Gala speech on Crimea's reunification with Russia. Well, first of all, he said that Crimea was an inseparable part of Russian history, a primordial Russian land, a cradle of Russian civilization and nationhood, and he portrayed it as being part of specific Russian history, a scene of important Russian national events, and of course the scene of Russian military valor. Very importantly, he used, when talking about Russians and Russia, he used the ethnically connoted Ruski word and not the Rossiyski word, which which usually have this more civic or imperial connotations, which means he specifically meant that this was an ethnic case, the case of ethnic unification of ethnic Russians. Besides that, he mentioned that Russian people in Ukraine were subject to enforced assimilation. So the term assimilation, once again, you can apply assimilation only to a different nation. So once again, he highlighted the difference between the Russian and Ukrainian nations. So Russians, in principle, could be assimilated into the Ukrainians. It's not one pan-Slav unity of some sort. Beyond that, he said that Crimea's population was put in real physical danger, again as denouncing Ukrainian nationalism as radical and vicious. And he said that, most importantly, Russian people are the largest divided nation in the world, which is a classical identist statement, which we have one nation split among many after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and we have to mend this situation and to unite all ethnic Russians in one nation state. Someone later, in his annual live questions and answers TV broadcast, first of all, Putin continued to use Ruski adjective when referring to Russians through all the speech. He never used the Россияне or Российские. All the time he used only Ruski term. Besides that, after he admitted Russian intervention into Crimea, he said that the intervention was a moral obligation to protect Russian compatriots in Crimea. He said, our Ruski people, our ethnic Russian people, were in danger, and therefore Russia could not act otherwise in Crimea, which means Russia had some sort of moral obligations towards ethnic Russian population beyond its borders, which practically makes Russia a nation state of ethnic Russians, a sort of national homeland of ethnic Russians. In a way, Israel is a national homeland for all Jews across the world, and it means that Russia have extraterritorial obligations towards salvaging Russian population and elsewhere. Well, he stated this idea very plainly and directly at the Victory Day in Sevastopol on May 9th. He said to the ecstatic crowd that met him there, said, Crimeans have preserved through the years and generations the love for the fatherland, and the fatherland accepts them as sons and daughters. So you have a classical identity claim of the fatherland defined obviously by ethnicity, otherwise why should they preserve their specific obligation to the Russian state and the Russian nation? Finally, just an interesting turn. Just this December, in Putin's address to the National Assembly, well, he continued to repeat all the traditional by then national formulations as reunification of Crimea and Sevastopol is Russia. He defined Crimeans as our people, and he used the Ruski adjective. But interesting, there was a certain national religious turn in his speech, a subject that was only briefly mentioned before. He said that Crimea was a holy ground, a holy land for the Russian nation. Since Prince Vladimir in the Middle Ages was converted to Christianity, Pravoslav Christianity there, and this is the person who then baptized all Russia to Christianity, and of course it was in a way certain and the origin of Russian nationhood and Russian identity. And this is of course being part of a certain traditionalist religious agenda that Putin is promoting since 2012. And this, if we analyze all these statements, we see that the grounding of Crimean annexation is a classical nationalist ethnic grounding, irredentist grounding, with a certain traditionalist and pro-religious connotations or coloring, which is, we can see it as being part of Putin's policy since 2012, when he promoted the status of Orthodox Church as a sort of official church and the basis of Russianness and Russian identity and what Russia is about nationally. There's of course a question of whether Putin is genuine about it or maybe he's complying, he's just using the national ethnic agenda for his political purposes. Well, we can of course know for sure what he thinks, but we do know that he uses this ethnic nationalism as a tool. It serves political goals rather than blindly dictating Russian policy. How do we know it? We know it by comparing the Crimea case with the case of East Ukrainian separatism and the way it was portrayed in Russian media and by Putin. First of all, in the beginning, we've seen that it seemed to convey to the same pattern as the Crimea annexation. In the beginning, there was Putin and the Russian press were talking about the need to protect the Russian and Russian-speaking population of South and East Ukraine, and they've also resurrected the Novorossiya term, which, of course, kind of refers to the Russian origin of these territories. And Putin also several times mentioned that Ukrainian borders and maybe even Ukrainian statehood are an accidental creations. So, which means that not only it is okay to change the borders. It is okay to unite the Russian nation and to mend Ukrainian borders because they are artificial anyway. But at a certain point, well, I guess it would be around end of April, maybe beginning of May, there was a certain change of policy, probably because the Kremlin didn't see the expected or anticipated popular uprising in Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine, and I suppose they decided to change the policy on the issue, and then they basically returned to this previous attitude on Ukraine, the one that we've seen, for example, during the Orange Revolution, which means he stressed Russian-Ukraine common historical and ethnic cultural roots. He denounced anti-Russian Western, he called it Galician, variant of Ukrainian identity, and portrayed it as a sort of artificial, not authentic Ukrainian identity being imposed by the propaganda, by the West on Ukrainians, because authentic Ukrainian identity is being part of this East Slavic world, East Slavic unity. Still, with some differences with Russians, but being as a sort of one larger collective of pan-Slav unity. And importantly, he started to focus on the geopolitical aspects of Ukrainian crisis. He was talking a lot about how the unjust world order and how the United States intervened in this crisis and imposed its legacy policies and promoted its interest inside Ukraine. And he spoke about he suddenly spoke about the danger of NATO stationing their forces in Crimea, but specifically in Ukraine, as Ukraine becoming part of NATO. So it was a very much geopolitical discourse all of a sudden, not a national one. So just to sum the evidence, first of all, Russia still, with all this ethnic wording, ethnic phraseology, Russia still lacks clearly stated and consistently implemented national vision. But we did see an unprecedented ethnic national identity rhetoric, communicated openly and plainly by the highest authority. This is very unusual for Putin to use the ethnic Russian words so plainly, so directly, and using only the ethnic Russian word for Ruski, not Rossiyski. This is very unusual for him. And we also see we can see this as a part of continuation of traditionalist ethnic trend launched in 2012. And so it's a part of a larger shift of Russian nationhood, of Russian perception of itself, of Russian identity. And whether it's genuine or just totalitarian, And the official propaganda still promotes ethnic Russian nationalism, so it's either capitalizes on an existing popular trend for the purposes of the government, and reinforces it, or maybe it's in a way creating this ethnic Russian trend, again for political mobilization and for the interest of the Russian government. But still, we have quite a new peak of ethnic Russian physiology, of ethnic Russian propaganda, if you like.